So that's my salad bowl, my lunch, and I'm going to be topping that with some black olive tapenade or tapenade, whatever it's called, and then James is going to have some of it. That's why there's a gap there, and
right there, yeah.
Some tomatoes with it.
Sure.
And I'm going to talk briefly about the Brokenwood Mysteries Series 8 and Valley of the Gods. And then I'm going to hand it over to James. So this is a book review deck dinner more than a video deck dinner.
Yeah.
So the Brokenwood Mysteries Series 8 is actually quite entertaining. It was kind of funny. I like the stories. It's a different kind of thing.
Where does it hail from? Australia or something?
Yeah. I think Australia, maybe New Zealand. I don't know.
Sometimes it's a little hard to tell.
Yeah. New Zealand. Assistance of the New Zealand government. Very good, New Zealand.
Funny way of talking slightly different from Australians.
Yeah, I guess I just have to get used to the difference.
We have a funny way of talking.
So, Valley of the Gods. This was terrible. Absolutely terrible. There's a lot of films out there. They want to be artistic and they just end up really sucking. This is so bad. It's 2 hours long. And at first I was thinking, oh well, yeah, this is going to be kind of different and whatever. No, it's just bad. Just bad.
Was it
Don't watch
the
it.
one that was pretty racist and all this sort of stuff? It wasn't racist.
What?
Okay. I heard it going on in the background.
I don't know. It didn't seem racist to me. Maybe.
Okay. Anyway, it was boring.
Do you want some of this now, or do you want when
later.
I'm done?
So
okay.
you
So I'll eat what I want.
Like. Sure.
Okay, you go on and book review then.
Oh, book review.
Well done.
I was gonna chow down, but I don't want to chow down on a review. So I started talking about Ere Voice. I think that's how you'd say it. Former voice, something like that. Maybe you misspelled Erie, as in Lake Erie. Or Pennsylvania actually has a slight hold on the southern shoreline of Lake Erie, and there's a place called Erie, Pennsylvania. If you're watching from Erie, Pennsylvania, hi. If you're watching from Pennsylvania, watching from anywhere along Lake Erie, north or south. It could be Ontario, or it could be in the United States. Hi. Could be Ohio, for example. Could be New York. Could be. There might be. I think Michigan might have a slight toehold on the western part of Lake Erie. Anyway, so we were going through this, and I read part of the. It's not really a blurb. It's supposedly an explanation of. Carl, I think they would mispronounce his name. He's probably dead now. Maybe he died of embarrassment. Probably should. Rakosi. Carl Rakosi. Probably should be Rakosi, because I suspect it's Hungarian. I know Rakos is we mispronounce it Rakos. It's a Hungarian. But Hungarians pronounce S's kind of like our SHs, and vice versa. Oh well, not vice versa. SZ, which in so many Eastern European languages stand for something like SH, they pronounce as S. So, if I'm not mistaken, Celis, the great tennis player, the greatest tennis player, male or female, to ever play, mutatus mutandis, and got stabbed by a terrorist supporter of Steffi Graf.
Somebody stabbed a tennis player?
Yeah.
Wow.
She was so good. There was a coach called, I think it was Nick Bollettieri. He coached Andre Agassi. Mm-hmm. You've seen Andre Agassi. Mm-hmm. And Andre Agassi was very good ground strokes. So he eventually learned to come to the net, but he was, they were saying, one of the best at return of serve. So it would come back at you. You'd have a hard serve, and this was the era of serve. And it would just come back at you harder than it came almost. Andre Agassi didn't have the discipline that Celis, we'll call her Celis. Do they call her Celis or Celis? We'll say Celis. But I think the Hungarian name is spelled S-Z-E, LESZ. But I suspect they went with a kind of like a phonetic spelling in English, Celis. So she was, I don't know if she was even 20, and she was just massacred in the previous queen of the tennis world, Steffi Graf. I think they call her Steffi, but it probably should be Steffi. And there was a supporter of Steffi Graf that didn't like that. So kind of in the middle of a match, he came out of the crowd, as I recall, and stabbed, he didn't want to kill her, but stabbed Celis in the back, or Celis in the back. And she was out for, I think, a year or maybe a little bit more, came back, she never was the same again. And I think down deep she feared that, you know, like if she got too good again, some crazed kind of neo-Nazi supporter, you know, like, hey, you know, we Germans got to be the best. So, well, Celis is Hungarian. I hope she's still alive. And if you're watching, I know, you know, like you don't have you didn't win all the championships and stuff like that. I know you were the best. Nick Bollettieri said you were the best student he ever had. And you were incredible. You weren't the kind of person that came to the net, you know, like a serve and volley. What you do is you just wear down the opposition with ground strokes, which is supposed to be from the baseline. That's from way back. But what happened is she'd just go, it was with such power, but more like just angle. She'd just work her way until she was maybe the middle of the court. Usually you don't want to be in the middle of the court. But she was so overpowering. It was incredible. So she'd taken over the women's tennis circuit. And I don't think she was even age 20. And she could have, I presume, kept on playing till she was 40, winning all the Grand Slams and stuff like that. But absolute shame. You know, eventually, you know, when she'd come back, I saw her play once in Toronto. What she'd do is Canadian Open, and she'd play a young girl shouldn't be having her favorite music all along the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix. You know, that's kind of like a cry and stuff like that. Anyway, a bit of a sidelight, but. Tennis is not my favorite sport, but I do like watching it. I tend to prefer team sports. I'm a team kind of player, and I believe in team play that stresses players individually deciding to play together and play in a cooperative kind of manner. I don't believe in cooperation being imposed from without, a la communism and a la, sadly, socialism is envisaged by almost every socialist out there. So I'm a social democrat that stresses the democracy over the socialism. And, you know, like there has to be individual responsibility. I don't believe in a Marxist adage to from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, because people have so many needs. You'll see it when people are playing hockey or football or something like that, particularly hockey, whining because a referee's called a penalty on them, and they're cheating, and they just want to be able to cheat to get to, you know, to get a win.
Well, and also who decides what a person's ability is and what a person's need is, you know?
Yeah. Well, the big trouble is, from what we've seen every time socialism has come to power exclusively, I'm not talking about the mixed democracies in Scandinavia, they have their problems too.
I mean, both you and I have been hooped over by the medical system. Are they going to determine our ability? They would, right? So they miss injuries, they don't diagnose properly, and then you're having to work through pain.
Yep. So they're kind of in the pockets of the employers. Well, they're in our pockets, I should say, but they're kind of on the side of the employers. And so if a person's having trouble with a claim, like a workers' compensation claim, you just get, the worker just gets to stay. Now there are a lot of workers who are copulating with a canine and will put in false claims and all that sort of stuff. I know one guy, I don't know if he put in some claims, went through an operation like yours on the wrist. You didn't call.
No,
this is the first time you've never objected.
It was only I said a procedure.
She always says it was a procedure. She had a ganglion cyst taken out. She continued to work through it and the pain and all this sort of stuff. Hey, this guy would be, like he'd be out having to seed a field or something like that. You'd come along him working the field. You'd be working on the edge of the field, and he'd just be sitting in the tractor reading a book. Ooh, like, was it break time? No, we weren't there on a break. And so he'd work to rule, and they eventually, how they punish him is they made him a foreman. Yeah, that's a city Lethbridge for you. And or that's the way it used to be, or maybe that was just the particular part of it. But I ran across some pretty good people in management of the city of Lethbridge, but most of them were absolutely useless, worse than useless. Useless is zero. They were in the negative numbers in terms of their contribution. So what they were saying is, in his own words, Rakoshi, a leading member of the objectivist group, I hope that wasn't in his own word, maybe it was, that included among others Louis Zukovsky, I've got stuff by him, Charles Reznikov, I've got stuff by him, and George Oppen. No, I don't have anything by him, I don't think. Boy, am I missing out. Seeks primarily to present, he does say primarily, to present objects in their most essential reality, and to make of each poem an object. Okay, so, like here's this here, and these objectivists are looking at this object according to their lights, objectively, and then they make the poem an object. So it's kind of like, in here I should find a glove, or something like that. And they should have called themselves the objectionableists. But it's maybe not even good enough to be objectionable. Anyway, meaning by this, obviously, the opposite of a subject. What does a subject come in? A subject, okay. The opposite, in other words, of all forms of personal vagueness, of loose bowels, and steaming, sometimes screaming consciousness. So I don't know if one of their big inspirations, maybe I'm being, it's not really ironic, it's more like sarcastic when I say it's not very sophisticated or anything like that, was a dude called T.E. Hume, and I think he styled himself as something of a philosopher. And T.E. Hume, I can recall one of his most quoted gems was he wanted, I can't quote it exactly, but he wanted dry, hard poetry. And so he wrote, I guess you could kind of call it imagist stuff, a little bit like William Carlos Williams, only maybe a little bit before. And so he deserves, for that William Carlos Williams kind of stuff, maybe a little bit of the credit, or maybe I should throw a prefix in front of credit, discredit, for developing that kind of K-rap. And so he wanted hard, dry poetry. So I call that kind of poetry, and this kind of stuff too, what shall I call it? Oh yeah, something like the Kostov school of poetry. So what does Kostov mean? Look that up in your funking wagnalls. And I said funking. What does Kostov mean? It means constipated. Dry, hard stuff. So they didn't like, I'm not a big fan of romantic poetry that's always emphasizing the infinite and misty landscapes, paleness. The early William Butler Yeats is a classic for pale. This is pale. That is pale. Pale, pale, pale. A lot of twilight stuff and so on and so forth. And that's kind of like almost like neo-romanticism. Romanticism dates back to the early times. It started showing up not much after 1750, but we associated in English with guys like Samuel Taylor Coleridge and William Wordsworth. They wrote lyrical ballads, or they published it. 1798. They kind of had a declamation, more than a declaration of romanticism in their preface. I think it was. I don't know who wrote that. Was it Wordsworth? I've gone through it. It was a bit of a struggle. I got it. Letter to a critic. So I put in front of it, dead letter to a critic. To the critic. The critic. There's no living with you when you pass yourself off as an interpreter. For whom is this game played? Are you less entitled to imagination than the poet? Django on a borrowed string. I'll vote for that. Django on a borrowed string. Does that be Django Reinhardt? I'll vote for that. Yeah, see, like, I'm a critic. I actually write poetry. It's going to seem like boasting to some of you folks, but it ain't. It's just like, I actually write poetry, not this kind of crap. So I'm a better poet than this idiot. And so I'm not an interpreter. I'm a fellow poet. Well, he's not really a poet, but at any rate. I'm his superior, and he writes garbage. Are you less entitled to imagination than a poet? I wouldn't say I've got more imagination than this idiot, but I got more technique. This guy had no technique as a poet, isn't it? Django on a borrowed string. I'll vote for that. So he's kind of getting a little emotional there. That didn't strike me as being objective or anything like that. Now, when you're dealing with, like critics, and I'm sure I've got little trolls out there who are just burning up with acid hearing some of the stuff I say. I certainly don't edit out my feelings about them. The poet to his reviewer, it is customary to rave about poetry. Why don't you? You tapped the champion on the shoulder, country boy, and broke his ankle. Out crept my cowering mouse. Beat it, you crummy beast, before we're discovered. The poet to his reviewer. I'm his reviewer, I'm reviewing you. Okay? It's customary to rave about poetry. I'm venting about this stuff. I'm not really raving.
I don't think people often rave about poetry.
Yeah.
Maybe in circles of poets they do. But honestly, we were walking along the trails one day and James was telling people about how I write poetry, and the woman said, "Yeah, I don't like poetry."
Yeah, that was funny.
I mean, who says that, right?
Yeah.
But she disliked it that much that she had to say.
Yeah. One time I was. You remember when you went up? Not Carthew Alderson, the really dangerous one. Ridge.
Oh,
Acamina. She went up Acamina. I couldn't go up. I started it and I bailed out a sensible time. The descriptions didn't describe what it was like, and
the first part is certainly a scramble.
Well, once you get
up
past the overview to Forum Lake, I'd call it something like a scramble. And I realize now the big problem was I really can't. It's really hard for me to clip my toe-ins.
Yeah.
I cannot really lift my knees up very close to my chest comfortably, and that's what you have to do to make it up there. And even then, it's going to be a trial. It's going to be scary. So that's why I couldn't get the next foothold up where, you get one foothold here and then get up to the next one. I just didn't have enough reach with my light. Is that a chickadee?
Yeah. That one's really interested in what we're doing here. I think they want our
they
food.
want to get that sort of stuff.
Well,
yeah.
no, I think they want
Maybe.
our food.
Yeah.
They've been trying
Anyway,
to get over,
chickadees can be
I
very
told
friendly.
them, no, you eat your food.
They can be very, very friendly. So, where was I going with this? Got distracted by the...
Oh, I'm sorry.
It doesn't matter.
Something about when I went up on the ridge and you were down below or something.
Yeah, that's right. So you went around, and I went almost as far because I had to track back all, back to the main pathway, and then I started the route that you were on from the other end. So I calculated I went a little bit more than you did, not even a fair amount up and down too, but not quite as much elevation. So I get, I'll say I don't get panicked, but I get scared when I'm out in the wild by myself. It's not recommended. Always take a friend. It's just like swimming. Always swim with a friend. You could come get a cramp or something like that, and that would be the end of you. But bears are less likely to attack if there's two or more of you. It's preferable. I think the received wisdom is more than 6 people have never been attacked by a bear. Trouble is, are you going to get 6 people that you know that actually like hiking?
Well, you could join in hiking.
Yeah, you could. Anyway, I was reciting to myself. I was going, what was I reciting? Something like turning and turning in the widening guide. The falcon cannot hear the falcon. Things fall apart loudly. And a couple of women came upon me. And
you had to explain what you were doing, that you were scared
I
of
didn't have
bears.
to, but I figured I would.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be more scared of me than the bears.
Yeah.
So I said I was reciting poetry. And I figured that would be, it's rebarbative to people, so it would be just as rebarbative to the bears and stuff like that. And they were just nodding. They knew exactly what I was talking
poetry.
about.
So that's been my experience. Like I thought I loved poetry, and so I thought, everyone loves poetry.
Oh no!
And then when you start telling people about how you write poetry, you realize, I shouldn't tell people because they hate it.
Oh, they hate it.
Even my family, when I'd written poetry and I brought it to them, and they were like, I like your stories better, and then I started singing it, and my mom was like, I get it now.
Yeah.
I didn't get it until you sung it, but I get it now.
Yeah, people don't mind poetry when it's sung. Sometimes they don't listen to it very well, like the verses. They'll just kind of catch the choruses or whatever, but that's okay. Do what you got to do. Right? Anyway, just don't go around killing poets like they did in the Soviet Union, because they were formalists. Now the latter day fellow travelers of the commies, they keep on saying they're not commies, they're Marxists. They're actually commies, they're not Marxists. And to be a Marxist is not a term of praise for me. But to be a commie is way worse. People like Herbert Marcuse and all his ilk, Angela Davis, horrible creeps. They're not even Marxists. They're way worse than Marxists. So, term of dispraise. Yeah, that kind of got me exercising. But at any rate, the poetry is, I read that one too. It's customary to, why don't you, I like poetry a lot. If I'm reading some good stuff or quoting it, sometimes it can bring a little bit of a tear to my eye. I'm not making it up. Sometimes it's hard for me to continue. It's when I say a little bit of a tear, that's no, it's not hyperbole. It's just the opposite. It's understatement. Okay, you tap the champion. Is this the champion? What? Country boy. Hey, I was born in the country, dude. But I've lived in fairly big cities. Calgary back when wasn't that big, but what the heck. And broke his ankle. What's sad about. Out crept my cowering mouse. Beat it, you crummy beast, before we're discovered. His cowering mouse. Is he talking to his cowering mouse? I'm not sure what it is. But like that's a little bit more emotional than what I would expect from a so-called objectivist. This is actually better than William Carlos Williams. I've got to admit. I have got to admit. But it's not poetry. Is it better than... Well, I can say about Walt Whitman that it is poetry. It's some of the most boring poetry ever committed to non-verse or something like that. Horrible stuff. Because at least because of the parallelism, you get the parallelism of the rhythms. But when you're doing William Carlos Williams stuff or T.E. Hume kind of stuff, or this kind of stuff, there isn't that much parallelism. So, yeah. How to be discovered as a great bard. I don't think he styles himself as a great bard. Learn the grandiose manner and the unending Orphic line. Ooh. Idolize a master and attach yourself to one tit. One is plenty. Represent the weakness of the age. Keep it at it for 40 years, preferably underground.
That is kind of funny.
It is, but, that's what he did.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I'd like to find out who his great bard was. He's got way more emotion in him than T.E. Hume aimed at, or stuff like that. Maybe Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound, he was a big guy to be published by these guys, and I get the impression these guys were styling themselves as left-wingers. Ezra Pound was a fascist, during World War II, doing a radio show that included anti-Semitic rants and stuff like that. So Ezra Pound is horrible. He was even a horrible... I mean, he'd do inversion, and it wasn't even verse. What's the point of doing inversion when you're not doing it for the rhyme and rhythm's sake? It's just to show off that you're kind of read the great masters and the unending Orphic line. Like classic. He was arrogant, but it was a specific type of arrogance. I've talked about it before. There's a lot of it out there. This guy's case in point. But Pound was a classic. Pretentiousness. Which involves basically pretending. Pretended to be a poet. Oh man. The Oath. I lack Bourne's modesty. Bourne. So this guy actually reads. Of course it'd be superficial. Who was so touched by the magnitude of Einstein. So what would this guy know about physics? That he couldn't work in that field. Which field are we talking about? Because Bourne worked in physics. I shall sit at his feet, though it is not my nature of things. Oh, I put that in. Okay. De rerum natura. De rerum natura. De rerum natura. Sad, my course is laid out on the expedient. Help me, Tempest. Be my physician.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay. If my note is plain, let it come out. So it's not even a note, but this stuff is plain. Anyway, don't bother even reading it unless you like, or unless you're something of a masochist. I suppose I am. I'm a bit of a completist. See ya.